Hey folks, before we even sharpen the carving knife on tonight's menu, quick pit stop. Smash that like button so the algorithm gods know you're awake. Tap subscribe if medieval weirdness is your midnight snack. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time your clock just whispered bedtime. I promise the more bizarre your location plus time combo, the happier my analytics demon becomes. Fan buzzing? Blankets cocooned? Perfect. Dim whatever light you have left because we're about to sit at a rickety trestle table in a torch-lit hall that smells like damp straw, wood smoke, and something vaguely rodent-esque sizzling on the spit. You are not just watching, you're right here, elbow to greasy elbow with a 13th century knight who swears his secret weapon isn't an enchanted sword, but dinner.
He rolls up his mail sleeve, clang, clatter, poof of dust, and points at the crackling roast. "Hedgehog," he says with utter sincerity, "best fuel for breaking shields." You swallow hard, taste the grit, and realize chivalry occasionally involves eating things modern people dodge with a lawnmower. Tonight, we're diving deep into the forgotten superfoods of the nightly diet. The oddities, the potions, the highly questionable protein sources that medieval warriors believed would bulk their biceps, calm their nerves, and maybe, just maybe, make them immune to spear thrusts. Picture the feasting hall first. Banners flutter overhead, embroidered with lions, lilies, and the obligatory Latin motto no one at the table can actually read. Hounds skitter between benches waiting for bones. Somewhere near the hearth, a minstrel plucks a rebec out of tune, singing a ballad about some earlier feast where Sir Godfrey supposedly bit the ear off an enemy and declared it chewy but invigorating. No one questions the story. They're too busy debating whether owl broth or boiled beaver tail builds better muscle tone. See, a knight's life was equal parts battle and bragging, and food sat at the center of both. They didn't have whey powder or barbells, but they did have folklore, monastery herbariums, and whatever crawled, hopped, slithered, or rooted itself within a day's ride. If it looked unusual, tasted potent, or inspired a wild rumor, onto the platter it went. Tonight, you've arrived on Hedgehog Night, the evening before a mock tournament when every squire and knight-errant crowds close to absorb the mystical mojo of the spiny little beast. Why Hedgehog? Medieval bestiaries credited it with two power moves. Rolling into a ball of armor like spikes, excellent metaphor for a shield wall, and stealing grapes from vineyards by impaling them on its quills, symbol of resourcefulness. If you eat the animal, the logic followed, you inherit both traits, impenetrable defense and sticky opportunism. Also, hedgehogs forage on worms and insects, so people thought the meat concentrated Earth's raw vitality. Sure, it's pseudoscience marinated in superstition, but tell that to Sir Fulk, who's gnawing a hind leg with iron determination and swears he can already feel his tendons knitting thicker. The cooking process alone is a tiny epic. First, the cook, call her Mathild, drops the squealing hedgehog into a cauldron just long enough to loosen the outer spines. She plucks them, singing a psalm as if that sanitizes the deed. Then rubs the carcass with crushed garlic, coriander, and salt. Next, she wraps it, here's the kicker, in a clay shell shaped like a miniature siege tower. Into the embers it goes, the clay bakes solid, and when she cracks it open an hour later,
The skin peels off neatly, spines gone, meat tender, juices trapped. The smell? Think pork crossed with wild mushroom, underscored by fireplace soot. The nights pair it with trenchers of coarse bread soaked in ale. Ale here isn't your hoppy craft IPA. It's liquid bread, cloudy, sweetish, loaded with calories and B vitamins. Carbs plus Hedgehog protein equals pre-battle macro heaven. Sir Folks Squires pass around a pewter pitcher of verjuice, sour green grape juice believed to sharpen eyesight. They're convinced superior vision keeps arrows from finding soft spots in your visor. Is any of this medically sound? Not even close. But the placebo effect rides a warhorse. Around the table, more strength foods materialize. One platter holds bull testicles poached in wine, served with a mustard so hot it makes your nose run like a broken aqueduct. Testosterone by ingestion, they claim. Another dish, black-feathered crow hearts skewered beside leeks. Crows, being survivors, supposedly lend resilience. Leeks purify blood. You chew politely, though the metallic tang suggests maybe the crow's resilience left the building an hour ago. Let's zoom out. Medieval nutrition reality versus nightly fantasy. In truth, most warriors subsisted on grains, barley pottage, spelt bread, and, whenever possible, cheese. Meat was a luxury, but prestige demanded visible indulgence, especially pre-combat. So lords splurged on exotic fauna, swans, cranes, yes, hedgehogs. A chronicler even recorded a French tourney feast where they served stuffed porpoise tail glazed in saffron. The mindset? Eat what swims fast, fly high, or fights fierce, and you'll absorb its essence like spiritual osmosis. Your cup refills with hippocras, wine infused with honey, ginger, cinnamon, and galangal. Spices scream status. Only the wealthy imported them, and knights adored flexing wealth. They also considered warming spices as internal armor against humoral imbalance. Too much cold phlegm could make limbs sluggish, they said. So ginger up, swing harder tomorrow. Across the hall, the local physician, barber-surgeon, sets up a side station. He's here to endorse tonight's menu with scholarly gravitas. He unfurls parchment diagrams of humors, points at hedgehog silhouette, and declares its meat hot and dry in the second degree. Ideal for men of martial temperament who must stoke their internal furnace. The crowd murmurs approval while discreetly wiping grease on their tunics. Then a hush falls. The lord of the castle stands, goblet raised, and invokes St. George. He claims St. George once revived his strength after dragon wounding by eating roast hedgehog gifted by a hermit. Total fabrication, but who's checking? The story ingrains deeper than truth. Tomorrow, squires will repeat it as gospel. Now let your senses wander beyond the feast. Imagine stepping out into the courtyard, cold, starry sky overhead, breath visible. Armor glints on racks, waiting for dawn. A stable boy yawns, brushing a destrier's coat with straw. You catch fragments of conversation. Two squires debate whether adding crushed emeralds to wine tomorrow morning will harden their hearts against fear. An older knight scoffs. Emerald is too brittle. He advises powdered pearl instead. These odd supplements weren't cheap. So how did lesser knights afford them? Sponsorship, medieval style. A wealthy patron might supply a concoction of ground stag antler and goose fat. In return, the knight bears the patron's crest on a surcoat. Early influencer marketing, gifted meal, if you will. Back in the hall, Mathilde presents the pièce de résistance. Hedgehog liver pâté molded into a tiny fortress. Battlements of butter, peppercorns for arrow slits. Spread it on bread, and you supposedly gain resolve. The liver, they insist, filters courage from the world's dangers. Consuming it transplants bravery straight into your chest cavity. The taste? Earthy, slightly metallic, and alarmingly addictive, because salt is rare and Mathilde is generous. Ayo mugs clang, time for toasts. Sir Folk leads with a rhyme. Prickly beast of forest floor, grant my arm the strength of boar. Roasted hot in holy flame, guide my sword to deathless fame. Everyone echoes, half drunk, half earnest. You're swept along, chanting lines you barely follow, but your pulse sinks to the rhythm. This is group psychology at its rawest, communal belief forging unity. If they all agree hedgehog meat equals victory, they'll ride out convinced destiny's on their side. And that conviction, historically, sometimes mattered more than actual protein content. Let's pause. Sip of reality check. Modern nutritional breakdown of hedgehog, roughly 21 grams of protein per 100 grams, low fat, decent iron. Not shabby, but hardly magical. Yet in an era when scurvy lurked and winter diets stagnated, any fresh meat tasted like a miracle. Add ritual and rare spices, and you have a full-blown performance-enhancing myth. Shadows lengthen, torches sputter. A jester tumbles forward, juggling hedgehog quills he secretly pocketed. He cracks jokes about spiky rear ends and knights who'll be too armored to sit tomorrow. Laughter breaks the tension, another essential pre-battle nutrient. Cortisol levels drop, courage rises. Before bedtime, the cook hands each knight a small pouch. Tonight's brew list. Inside, crushed hedgehog bone, rich in marrow power. Dried nettle leaves for vigor. A pinch of salt to ward off cramps. The instructions: steep in ale overnight. Gulp at dawn. You note some nights quietly slip extra honey into theirs. Performance doping by sweetness. Let's stroll to the chapel. Candles flicker over relics. A bone sliver of St. Maurice. Feathers from the archangel's pillow. Probably goose. Knights kneel, ask heavenly blessing on tomorrow's strength. But notice, they also slip hedgehog spines into their belts right next to the relics. Faith in God meet faith in forest cuisine. As you step back outside, stable smells mix with wood smoke. A sleepy moon hangs over battlements. Someone practices sword swings against a post, grunting. He pauses, catches his breath, breaks off a chunk of hedgehog fat he'd pocketed earlier, cold mouth, congealed, and chews with determination. You realize this isn't just supper, it's identity. Knights define themselves by what hardships they survived, and weird diets were proof of grit. Now, feel the straw mattress under your borrowed pallet in the guest loft. rough blanket, clang of armor echoing below as squires polish buckles by firelight. Somewhere an owl hoots. You swear you smell hedgehog still, trapped in your hair. You drift toward sleep, but jolt awake hearing distant howls. Wolves? No, the kennel hounds arguing over discarded bones. You wonder if the marrow really does confer courage, or if that's just a tale told so castles can sleep through the scary dark. Dawn will come, trumpets will blare, and every man who tasted hedgehog will step onto the tilting field feeling 10 pounds lighter in fear, 10 pounds heavier in certainty. Will it stop a lance? Probably not, but belief layers invisible armor over chainmail. And that, friends, is why roasted hedgehog earned a seat on the medieval superfood podium. Next feast, we'll sample squirrel brain custard, fermented bear paw, and the infamous black onion sauce monks banned for its inflaming properties. But those delicacies lie in tomorrow's pot. Right now, your eyelids droop like banner flags after rain. And that's the cue we've reached the cozy part of the night. Take one last taste of crackling fireplace, distant snoring, and the faint, earthy afterscent of hedgehog drifting up through floorboards. If your stomach gurgles, relax. It's just your imagination bench-pressing medieval protein myths. Let it. Inhale, exhale. The hall quiets, except for a lonely coal popping. Before you slip fully into dreams, maybe dreams of rolling into a spiky ball for invulnerability, do me a favor. If you're still conscious, hit that like, share this oddball history with a friend who thinks kale smoothies are daring, and drop a comment. Would you taste roasted hedgehog for glory? Honest answers only. I'll be reading them with a nose peg. All right, lanterns are still smoldering low, but the kitchen fires roar back to life, because apparently sleep is for peasants and accountants, not for hungry war machines in polished steel. Tonight's round 2 menu begins with a smell that could wake the dead. Squirrel brain custard simmering in a copper cauldron the size of a baptismal font. You heard me, custard. Thick, velvety, slightly sweet thanks to a drizzle of forest honey. But floating in it are pale gray nuggets no pastry chef would ever garnish willingly. A scrawny page ladles gobfuls into wooden cups, while an elderly knight explains, with complete academic certainty, that squirrel cranial matter sharpens reflexes. See how they leap from branch to branch, he croaks, one eye milky with cataract. Eat the mind, gain the spring. Logical as drinking ink to improve handwriting, but the hall buys it. You peer into your portion. Bits swirl like tiny islands in a beige sea. Take the plunge or risk looking cowardly. Peer pressure in plate armor is brutal. The first spoonful coats your tongue in a strangely nutty warmth, almost pâté meets eggnog. You swallow, half expecting nightmares of acorn hoarding. Around you, tankards thud the tables, each knight trying to out-grunt his neighbor. Nearby, a bard jots verses of rodents sly and agile bright, whose tiny brains grant strength in fight. He'll sell the stanza to the next feast for a silver groat. Knights love poetic justification for culinary crimes. Let's examine the origin story. Monastic herbal texts claimed squirrel flesh was warming and moist in the 3rd degree. Translation, good for men whose blood ran too cold, aka men trembling before a dawn battle in November. But what about the brain specifically? A physician named Gilbertus Anglicus wrote that the brain of any beast feedeth the sinews. Keep sinews supple, swing swords cleaner. One copyist probably added a marginal doodle of a hopping squirrel, and voila, recipe born. Science? 0. Narrative power? Off the charts. Across the trestles, someone unseals a stone jar of fermented bear paw. Imagine a fist-sized hunk of gelatinous meat, dark as midnight, glinting with fat, smelling like smoked ham left in a wine cellar for 5 years. The jar's lid whooshes off with a gasp, fermentation gases greeting daylight. The paw flops onto a trencher, claws intact. The hall quiets. Bear, emblem of brute force. Legend says King Arthur once wrestled a bear for sport. Probably apocryphal, but why stop a good yarn? One chunk allegedly multiplies a man's bench press by 10. Real biochemistry. Fermented collagen, a little lactic tang, some bone marrow lipids. Not exactly steroids, but in an age where warm meals in winter were rare, that protein lump might indeed resurrect your energy. Preparation involved burying the paw in salted barley mash for a month, letting nature's micro-artists transform tough collagen into jelly. Dig it up, rinse with ale, flash roast over oak coals, then dunk in a glaze of honey and vinegar. Sweet, sour, smoky. Of course, that barley mash gets fed to pigs afterward, nothing wasted. You tear off a piece, tricky claw hooking your sleeve, chew and feel sticky resin coat your teeth. Sir Fulk claims it anchors courage, which is medieval for sticks to your ribs. Same thing. But maybe the most controversial dish of the night is on its way. Black onion sauce, monks once banned. Picture kitchen doors swinging wide, Mathilde returning like a victorious siege captain, holding an iron pot emitting fumes that sting eyes at 20 paces. Inside, charred onions pounded with lampblack, yes, soot, vinegar, garlic, and just enough dried chilies imported through dubious Iberian merchants. The result, tar-colored slurry, rumored to inflame the spirit. Monastic records from Cluny complain knights who ate it became quicker to sin, thirst, and song. Translation, they got aggressive, sweaty, and loud. For warriors, perfect. She ladles dollops over thick slices of venison. The sauce slides like lava, hissing where it meets meat. The first bite detonates heat across your palate. Nasal passages flare, eyes water. Instant head rush. No wonder monks banned it. Impossible to chant psalms politely when sinuses gush. The knights cheer, belts loosen. One burly fellow bangs his pewter cup until the rim bends. He claims he can now smell enemy fear miles away. Maybe it's the garlic breath. Time to zoom to the courtyard again. Past midnight now, torches splutter, filter warm halos onto snow-dusted cobbles. Knights test their agility, running at barrels while squires roll them downhill. Hedgehog Knight made them invincible. Squirrel Custard gives them bounce. Bear Paw pushes their mass. Black onion sauce lights the fuse. You sense a theme. Each superfood covers a psychological stat: defense, agility, power, ferocity. They're basically building a live-action role-playing buff schedule. Let's follow a pair of squires creeping to the herb garden. They whisper about dragon's blood draft, a tonic brewed from beetroot, mint, and enough red wine to drown a mouse. It's actually just beak wine, earthy and sweet, but the color sells the fantasy. They believe drinking it before dawn keeps wounds from bleeding out. Hemostatic by hue, apparently. Little do they know, beet pigments might indeed pigment urine tomorrow, fueling a fresh myth of blood-turned-warrior red. Inside the stables, another tradition brews: equine empathy. Knights feed their war horses small cakes laced with ground fenugreek, oats, and a sliver of dried hedgehog fat saved from earlier. "If my horse eats my ration, we share courage," Sir Fulk explains, patting his destrier's neck. The horse just wants the honey binding. Still, Placebo gallops on 4 legs too. Let's step back to the hall where the minstrel now recounts Roman gladiators' barley diets, twisting history to legitimize tonight's grain-heavy ale chugging. He cites Pliny, incorrectly, that roasted hedgehog bones in vinegar dissolved kidney stones and fear alike. Applause erupts. You'd fact-check, but the Wi-Fi is 800 years away. Observe the social hierarchy through food proximity. High lords get center seats, nearest roaring fire and largest bear paw chunks. Lesser knights hug walls, gnawing leaner slices. Hierarchy tastes like fat content. At the fringes, mercenary crossbowmen spoon barley stew. No superfoods for hirelings. Mystic menus are perks of noble birth. Yet tomorrow on the battlefield, an arrow sees no titles. Now a hush. The castle chaplain enters with a reliquary, supposed fingerbone of Saint Sebastian. He dips it into each knight's cup of Hippocras. Sanctified beverage, double buff. But watch, Mathilde slyly dribbles a drop of black onion sauce into the chaplain's wine. He grimaces, tears stream, congregation stifles laughter. Not even holy men escape the spice gauntlet. We must address digestion, medieval performance's silent enemy. What happens after hedgehog, squirrel-breen custard, bear paw, and incendiary onion goo fuse inside iron-gutted bellies? Medieval medics offered viper oil laxative to clear bad humors. Basically olive oil heated with dried snakeskin, cooled, gulped. Knights call it the purge before the surge. And yes, latrines become war zones. Some swear the discomfort toughens them further. If you can survive the purge, arrows feel like pinpricks. Self-justification at its smelliest. Let's slip outside again, climb the spiral stair to the parapet. Cold wind snaps banners, your breath fogs. Below, the kitchens dump bones to waiting pigs. Stars glitter, Orion's belt resembles 3 trebuchet counterweights. You lean on the stone and feel the castle hum. A living organism digesting stories, fears, and protein at once. Sneak peek into tomorrow's breakfast. Pine marten jerky, for predator cunning. Chased by raw egg yolk, whipped with ale and honey. Nightly protein shake. Yolk color indicates chicken's diet. Deep orange means high carotenoids, thus solar strength. They'll knock it back in one gulp and gallop to battle with yolk mustaches.
But we're not done with dinner yet. The final communal ritual, breaking the shield crust pie. Imagine pastry shaped like a heater shield, baked thick with lard. Inside, minced hare, raisins, parsley, pepper. When cut, steam curls out like dragon breath. They slice it in order of tomorrow's jousting list. Get an edge piece, your first tilt. Center slice, your later. Knights claim the more crust you eat, the sturdier your actual shield arm. Carb loading disguised as prophecy. You accept a modest wedge, hoping for mid-morning combat. Not too early, not too late. The hall winds down. Minstrel plucks a lullaby about St. Michael's armor shining brighter after a feast of goat kidneys. Subtle hint that goat might appear at next banquet. Torches gutter low. Shadows leap huge across walls painted with faded frescoes of earlier hunts. The air thickens with smoke, sweat, and pepper. Somewhere, someone retches discreetly. Black onion backlash. A page scrambles with a bucket of straw to cover it. Battle readiness involves managing collateral smells. Now you retreat to the dormitory loft again. Pallets line both walls, knights shedding mail shirts with sighs. One polishes his sword edge using leftover hedgehog fat as lubricant, makes steel bite, he claims. Another stitches a patch on gambeson, humming off-key. Everyone smells faintly of spice, rodent, and smoke. You crawl under a wool blanket, straw poking your ribs, but adrenaline still zips through veins. Could be the caffeine-like buzz from ginger and pepper. Could be nerves. As eyelids flutter, your mind replays the feast's logic. Consume animal, gain its trait. Eat agile squirrel, leap. Eat fierce bear, overpower. Eat prickly hedgehog, defend. Swallow incendiary sauce, ignite. It's a medieval RPG buff system, centuries before power-up potions in games. And you start to appreciate how stories conveyed nutrition, courage, and identity all at once. The scientific method might have been missing, but communal belief produced genuine psychological edge. Whether that wins battles, we'll see at dawn. Drift deeper. Hear distant hoot of tawny owl. A squire's quiet prayer floats up through floorboards. Lord, let the hedgehog guard my heart, the bear shield my back, the squirrel quicken my hands. Superfood liturgy. Your last conscious thought. If faith that strong nested in every bite, maybe it doesn't matter what's on the plate. Only what's in the mind. Sleep steals you away, wrapped in pepper-scented darkness. If you are still listening through half-closed eyes, well done, champion. Tap that like before dreams claim your thumb. Share the video with any keto friends who think they've tasted strange, and drop a comment. Which dish would you dare? Squirrel custard, bear paw, or black onion lava? I'll pin the bravest answer. Sunlight doesn't so much rise over the battlements as sneak through smoke still curling from last night's kitchen fires. The courtyard smells like damp straw, horse sweat, and the faint echo of squirrel custard burps. Romantic, right?
Roosters crow, but their timing is pointless. Half the nights haven't slept, and the other half dream with eyes open, clenched on phantom sword hilts. A muffled trumpet bleats somewhere, probably a squire practicing breath control, and you swing your legs off the pallet, boots thudding the planks. First sensation, tongue feels like it's coated in furry bear jelly. Second sensation, stomach has become a debating society. Hedgehog fat arguing loudly with black onion lava.
The ritual for this gray gold dawn begins not with prayer, but with the castle's version of a smoothie bar. A makeshift side room where barrels, jugs, and stone mortars clutter every surface. Mathilde, queen of questionable gastronomy, stands in the center wearing a flour dust apron that might once have been white. Around her, pages ferry ingredients like alchemical assistants. On the menu, pine marten jerky strips pulverized with raw egg yolks and honeyed ale, the promised solar strength tonic. She whisks the slurry in a copper bowl, each rotation slopping froth onto her sleeves. Knights line up with wooden mugs. One by one, they tip back the thick potion. You join the queue, mugs smelling faintly of last night's bear paw grease. The draft hits your lips warm, sweet, then slides into a savory depth, like a breakfast stout that forgot its manners. It coats the gullet and blooms into heat at the core. Some claim immediate vision sharpening. Others claim their biceps flex of their own accord. Placebo? Maybe. But palpable camaraderie forms, and that's half the point. While mugs drain, squires bring forth platters of fire seed wafers. Think graham cracker-sized discs made from ground mustard seed, rye, and powdered ginger. They're crisp, peppery, perfect for waking mouth nerves. A traveling apothecary once told Sir Folk that mustard warms the spleen, stirs the blood, and banisheth slug spirit. Try saying that 5 times quickly with a wafer wedged between molars. You crunch one down. Nasal passages flare open like castle gates. Slug spirit officially exorcised. Next station over, a copper cauldron burbles with rag and bone broth. Despite the macabre name, it's basically bone stock simmered overnight with scraps of last evening's venison shield pie crust. The star additive, shredded rags of leeks and nettles for iron. The physician sweeps in, thin man wrapped in fur, reeking of camphor, to drop in a handful of powdered oyster shell. For the marrow, he mutters. Calcium, yes, but mostly another layer of story. Oysters mean coastal vigor. If sea creatures survive crashing waves, maybe knights survive crashing lances. You ladle broth into a horn cup. Taste, salty, grassy, faint echo of the sea. The cup warms cold fingers, a blessing because frost still webs the iron gate hinges. As bell tolls prime, the drawbridge descends with groans. Outside, a training paddock emerges from morning fog. Here begins the digestive gallop. Knights jog gentle laps, chainmail clinking like tambourines. Exercise after breakfast might sound modern, but medieval manuals insist moderate movement settles the belly and stirs the humors to harmony. Truth, it prevents them from falling asleep on horseback. While running, they chew on sticks of sweet flag, a root tasting like peppery cinnamon, supposed to clear breath and quiet reflux. Medieval breath mint and antacid combo. You gnaw yours, tongue tingles. Meanwhile, Mathilde isn't finished. She trundles a handcart into the yard, laden with small corked bottles. Dragon's blood beet wine, left over from the squire's midnight plotting. She distributes them to heralds and baggage drivers. Even non-combatants need superstition armoring. A driver uncorks his, crimson liquid shining like rubies, tilts it back, wipes beard, and declares, "Now my oxen shall fear nothing." The oxen continue chewing cud, entirely fearless of everything except maybe the next cart rut.
Let's wander through the supply tents for a moment. Open a hemp cloth flap, and inside you'll find sacks marked with charcoal sketches: sparrow, hare, eel. These aren't actual meats, they're spice blends customized to mimic attributes. Hare mix is thyme, juniper, and vinegar powder. Stir it into barley and you have Fleetfoot porridge. Eel mix, pepper, anise, and dark treacle gives slippery resilience. The cook can transform mundane grains into mental amulets with a pinch and a story. Cheap, light to carry, and infinitely tweakable. Consider it medieval Gatorade flavor packets. Back in the courtyard, a commotion. A falconer arrives bearing a freshly trapped songbird cage. He claims roasted lark hearts bring clarity of voice for battlefield commands. Tiny hearts, size of thimbles, skewered on splinters of rosemary, smoke over a brazier. Knights queue again, each receiving one micro morsel, chewing thoughtfully. It tastes smoky, resinous, almost too small to notice, but they swear lungs feel hollower, words ring louder. You pop one? Mostly rosemary, but you imagine your next shout echoing off distant hills. Power of suggestion? Perhaps. Power of belonging? Undeniable. Now it's arms training hour. On the tilt yard, straw dummies await. The master-at-arms barks orders, but with a twist. Every time a knight lands a proper strike, he must step aside and snack on courage kernels, handful of roasted chickpeas dusted with salt and cumin. Snackification of technique keeps energy high, but also ties nutrition to success loops. Miss a strike? No kernels. Human brain loves reward pellets, be it in office candy jars or medieval tilt lines. Your turn arrives. You swing a practice sword. Thunk, center mass. Squire offers the pouch. Kernels crunch like victory confetti. Salt slick of sweat meets salt of cumin. Synergy. Mid-morning sun climbs. Chainmail warms. Hydration break. Buckets of spring sting water. Fresh well water infused overnight with mint and a single crushed clove. Slightly spicy, enough to trick the palate into thinking water is a luxury elixir. They swig greedily. You follow suit. Cool hits stomach, quenching not just thirst, but the, let's be honest, onion sauce afterburn. Let's pause for context. Medieval castles didn't ordinarily lavish knights with endless specialty foods. Most campaigns scraped by on hardtack and salt pork. But before a set-piece clash, lords spared coin for morale feasts. We're witnessing psychological investment disguised as dinner. Scholars reading victual rolls often wonder why Hedgehog appears at all. It's small, thorny, hardly worth the trouble. Answer: theatrical edge. The hedgehog's transformational myth outweighed its caloric insignificance. Same with today's exotic condiments. Small quantities, big legend. Time jump. 40 minutes. The Duke arrives. Purple cloak throwing sparkles in morning light. His herald unfurls a parchment roster announcing champion challenges. As names echo, knights reflexively touch their stomach, their pantry of power. Superfood confidence radiates. The Duke's clerk hands out sigils painted on wafer-thin gingerbread shields. Eat your sigil, absorb your identity, they say. You bite into a gingerbread hawk, speckled with poppy seeds for watchfulness. Tastes like honey, clove, and self-branding. Now, behind the stables, there's a more secretive ritual, the apothecary's tent. We step inside. Shelves of clay vials, bundles of dried things. Knights slip in one at a time, seeking bespoke enhancers. Sir Alaric requests lion nerve sachets, ground valerian root tied in cloth to sniff before charging, calms jitters while sounding feral in origin. Sir Cecily, yes, she, asks for moon milk, goat milk steeped with mugwort, claiming it sharpens intuition. The apothecary obliges, muttering about dosages like medieval mixologist. He's equal parts medic, psychologist, and PR agent for whatever's in his jars. Outside the tent, you spot scribes tallying the larder. Hedgehog carcasses down to 2, the cook ordered 20. Bear paw supply exhausted, till next hunt. Squirrel brains still plentiful, groves teem with donors. Black onion sauce kettle scraped clean. One scribe notes to prepare lighter batch tonight, monks complained again. Logistics of legend require spreadsheets, parchment sheets anyway. And because contentment breeds complacency, the chaplain initiates a sobering balancing act, a brief open-air litany blaming gluttony for past defeats. He quotes Proverbs, "Put a knife to thy throat if thou be a man given to appetite," while everyone burps politely. It's performative guilt. No one's renouncing bear gelée anytime soon. But the reminder that spiritual readiness matters as much as caloric readiness gives knights moral alibi to continue snacking in moderation. Moderation meaning only third helpings. Let's move to the smithy, glowing coals and ringing anvils. Armorers line the inside of helmets with fresh wool pads soaked in rosemary oil. Claim, herb fumes invigorate senses and fend off lice. Side effect, every exhale smells like roast lamb garnish. While the smith hammers rivets, his apprentice sprinkles salt into the forge, superstition to keep metal obedient. Salt is precious. Wasting it on fire is symbolic show of wealth and faith. Noon approaches. The official pre-battle meal, the still fast, must be light yet potent. Tables in a shaded arcade fill with bowls of lentils cooked in bone broth, topped with shredded kale and grated horseradish. Lentils offer carbs and iron. Kale was pig fodder, but ironically nutrient-dense. Horseradish blasts sinuses wide open for better breathing. A jug of diluted wine sits in the center, safer than plain water. In each jug floats a woody sprig of rosemary, again cleansing and ceremonial. You eat slowly. Lentils taste earthy, kale chewy. Horseradish tears up eyes but wakes brain. Conversation turns strategic. Who will take left flank? Whose banner will anchor center? Which Viscounts forgot to pack extra bowstrings? Food keeps mouths moving. Strategy seeps between spoonfuls. In an alcove beyond, the minstrel rehearses a new ballad praising the Hedgehog Knights. He rhymes prickles with miracles, creative license running wild. Marketing department in action, inspire before outcome. If battle is won, tune becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. If lost, maybe no one survives to contradict him. Either way, Hedgehog merch sales will skyrocket at local fairs.
Now you sneak to the ramparts for a breather. Below, you spot peasants delivering bushels of green walnuts, future ingredient for brain bite candies. Dried walnut halves coated in honey and vinegar, rumored to sharpen wits mid-campaign. Supply chain never stops. You realize every food in this ecosystem is narrative currency. People pay coin, time, or risk to add chapters to the collective myth of strength.
Sudden shout. A scout returns dusty, claiming enemy vanguard 8 miles away. Immediate shift. Courtiers scurry, knights snap helms shut, but not before someone thrusts a small cloth pouch into each gauntleted hand. Inside, dried blueberries rolled in ground mint sugar. Portable antioxidant bombs centuries ahead of marketing jargon. They call them watchberries. Eat one every hour to stave off fatigue. You pop 3, rulebook betrayed. Tart spike on tongue, sugar fizz, instant energy. Armor assembly line kicks into final gear. Squires buckle cuisse. Pages fetch water skins doped with fennel seeds. Fennel belches taste like licorice, makes helmet breath bearable. The physician darts around smearing boar grease, actually lard mixed with thyme, on exposed joints to prevent chafing. You stand still, arms lifted, as a page ties your gambeson cords, and the smell of thyme flashes you back to hearths and home gardens miles away. Comfort, packaged in grease. Sir Folk presents the piece de resistance, Thunder Cakes. Imagine dense oat cakes studded with candied ginger and nearly raw chunks of bacon, pressed into circles the size of shields, but only half-inch thick. They break clean with a crack, releasing ginger fumes and bacon aroma that could animate stone gargoyles. Knights strap one to saddle pommels for mid-battle bite. You pocket yours, crumbly edges jingling against dagger. Let's drop in on the war horses. Grooms rub chests with mixture of vinegar, garlic, and bear fat remnants, both to warm muscles and mask human scent. Horses snort. The air reeks like medieval sports ointment. Feed bags hang from muzzles. Oats mixed with honey and dried apple shards, charger chow. Anything to keep mounts explosive when trumpets call. Suddenly, the Duke's standard rises on the keep roof, signal to muster at outer ward. Knights clank into formation, chainmail shimmering under noon sun. Before helmets close, each man and woman performs final mouth ritual. They chew on a sliver of steel bark, actually dried birch bark soaked in vinegar and ground iron filings scraped from the forge floor. Metallic tang floods taste buds, symbolic ingestion of steel. Real iron dosage negligible, but they swallow determination in particulate form. Trumpets blare, portcullis lifts, column creeps across the drawbridge, hooves clopping in rhythmic prophecy. You ride near rear rank, heartbeats sinking with thousands of iron shoes. Thundercake within arm's reach, watchberries in pouch, rosemary helm pad releasing fragrance with each bounce. Ahead, open countryside dotted with hawthorn hedges and tattered scarecrows that look suspiciously like low-budget banners.
Pausing halfway to enemy line, the company halts in meadow knee-deep with buttercups. Stretch stop? Nope, another feeding. Pages pass around quick prickle skewers, hedgehog meat left over, diced and grilled on willow sticks, glazed with mead. Portable nostalgia of last night's star dish. Sugar rush plus memory lane equals morale spike. You munch, sweet, gamey, woody. In this lull, physician circulates distributing amber drop elixir. Thin glass vials with corks contain honey wine infused with tree resin. Knights dab on gums for pain dulling, preemptive analgesic. You follow, gag slightly at pine sap sweetness, but soon lips tingle numb. Dental health? Questionable. Battlefield tolerance? Possibly improved. March resumes. Wheel ruts bump. Sky shifts. Thin clouds frame sun like tarnished silver. You spy enemy pennons flapping faintly at horizon. Heart jumps. Brain consults belly pantry. Are hedgehog spikes primed? Squirrel agility loaded? Bear power roared? Self-inventory complete, you grip reins tighter. Around you, restless nights chant hushed refrains. Brains of squirrel, heart of bear, hedgehog keep, onion flare. It rhymes better in Anglo-Norman, trust me. And then, the final, quietest ritual, silence. Column halts behind low hill. Helmets come off briefly. Knights kneel, plant thunder cakes in grass, break them into quarters, share with neighbor. Communion of carbs. They chew slowly, eyes closed, feeling the ginger bite, bacon salt, oat heft. A swallow, a breath, a prayer. Let my body be as firm as oat, as swift as ginger, as resilient as boar. Thunder cake fragments vanish. Wrappers, parchment scraps, tucked back into saddlebags. Littering is for barbarians. Helmets slide down, visor slits narrow sight to enemy ridge. Trumpet signals attack posture. Knights mount, squires scatter. You lower visor, rosemary floods nose. Mint sugar crystals cling to tongue. Horses snort, paw earth, fused with your nerves via shared hedgehog fat cake. Sun glints on 100 swords, miniature mirrors flashing midday blaze. Plumes lift in breeze like fire from helmets. In that suspended heartbeat before thunder of charge, the entire culinary mythos condenses into one belief. You are what you consumed. Agile, spiky, unyielding, fiery. Fact check irrelevant. Conviction unbreakable. Hooves launch, the world tilts, and meadow becomes sea of motion. Plate clangs, banners whip, and somewhere inside your rib cage, hedgehog bravado melds with bear roar. You lower lance, aim, and trust that every bizarre dish has your back. First impact jolts entire skeleton, but joints greased with boar lard hold. Sinews fed on squirrel mind react. Vision clears courtesy of lark hearts. You stay saddle fast, thunder cake crumbs rattling in pouch. Enemy shield splinters, cheers erupt behind. It's working, or at least feels like it. Battle becomes blur, steel arcs, mud sprays, voices echo. Mid-fight snack happens almost unconsciously. You bite watchberries, feel sugar and mint spark. You swig fennel water. Nausea threatens but retreats. Hours compress. Eventually trumpets call rally. Both sides drag back, counting breaths. Casualties, yes, but your line holds. Knights pat each other's gorgets, laughing through blood. They credit Hedgehog and sauce, of course. Post hoc ergo propter hoc, but who argues with survival? Sun dips. Field smoke settles into pink mist. You ride back to castle slower. Thundercake wrapper now empty save a ginger shard. Body aches, but spirit floats. Inside gates, peasants cheer. Mathilde waves ladle like scepter. She's already plotting tonight's victory stew. Perhaps eel hearts, parsley, and last keg of dragon's blood wine. Knights dismount, pass flasks, slap shoulders. Someone starts the chorus. Roast the beast, claim its best. Strength is hunger put to test. Off-key, but heartfelt. Armor comes off, one strap at a time. Physician checks bruises, administers yarrow salve, smelling of hay. You sit on a barrel, let dusk wind cool sweat, and realize taste memories of hedgehog, squirrel, bear, and onion have braided into personal legend. Tomorrow, scribes will ink chronicles crediting Duke's tactics, but troubadours will sing of the feast that forged victory. Which story lasts longer? Bet on the one with hedgehogs. If you've stayed awake through clashing lances and culinary carnage, respect. Smash that like button like a thunder cake. Share with anyone who thinks energy gels are hardcore. And tell me in comments, which combat snack should make a comeback? Watchberries, steel bark, or courage kernels? I'll toast the boldest pick with a virtual horn of beet wine. Torches sputter along the castle courtyard, halos of orange licking upward into a sky that's finally given up its pinks and settled on bruised indigo. The wind tastes of iron and churned earth, battlefield perfume still clinging to every cloak. And yet, inside these walls, a different aroma begins to rise, one thick with fat and promise. Cauldrons clang, spits creak. Someone pours ale too aggressively, so that amber foam waterfalls down a cask and patters onto flagstones like distant rain. You step beneath the portcullis arch, body humming with weariness and adrenaline residue, and the first thing you hear is Mathilde's triumphant cackle. Hedgehogs, to the fire, and bring the nettle ale before it tames itself. A semicircle of kitchen hearths lines the great hall's southern wall, each maw glowing devil red. On low tables, tonight's victory menu lies in messy grandeur. The showpiece, of course, is a fresh battalion of hedgehogs, spines singed off, meat scored, stuffed with minced apple and sage. Glaze them with honey, and they glisten like lacquered pine cones. Around them parade lesser celebrities. Smoked frog legs wrapped in bacon, leap strength, swears the Duke. Eel and date kebabs for sinewy resilience. And a tray piled with what looks like burnt charcoal briquettes, but are actually bloodstones. Beetroot pulp pressed with sheep's blood and rye crumbs, then char-baked until black. Crack one open, and the inside bleeds crimson steam. Knights swear it thickens their own blood, makes wounds clot faster. Physicians roll eyes, but even they nibble. Before anyone can slice or skewer, the Duke himself strides in. Dusty cloak discarded, he's donned a tunic embroidered with golden hedgehogs. Fashion pivot faster than a TikTok trend. He climbs a dais, raises a pewter goblet. To the brave, the bloody, and the beasts that fueled us.
An answering roar rattles rafters. Goblets smack tables, pewter kisses oak, wine arcs in drunken parabolas. You drink, red, robust, laced with a surprise of time that pricks sinuses awake again. The toast segues into a second, led by Sir Cecily, to the cooks who weaponized our bellies. Mathilde blushes behind a ladle big enough to bathe a toddler. Feast protocol begins. Each knight must contribute a personal morsel captured or bartered during campaign. Sir Fulk presents a pouch of pine nuts he snatched from enemy supply carts. He sprinkles them over the spitting hedgehogs, resinous scent mingling with sage. Sir Alaric dumps a handful of candied violets onto the eel plate, too pretty to belong here, but the juxtaposition grants bragging rights. You produce your paltry offering, 2 tiny quail eggs pickled in juniper brine, purchased from a peasant girl along the march. They garner polite nods. You slide them into a stew, where they vanish like secrets into rumor. As benches fill, minstrels roam tuning lutes. Their refrain tonight is half triumph, half digestion advice. Lyrics about chew 40 times lest hedgehog prick thee from within. Laughter gargles through ale. Platters travel left to right, right to left, until orientation disappears. You spear what passes, chew until flavor reveals itself, and then ask questions. One mouthful delivers sweet chestnut mash laced with what you assume is saffron. No, that's calendula petals, cheaper but still golden. Another bite tastes like peppered leather until you realize it's dried boar skin candied in molasses. Crunch, chew, swallow, hope. Somewhere amid courses, the castle surgeon stands to distribute his party favors, tiny wax packets labeled in crabbed Latin. Open one and find grayish paste smelling of licorice and ammonia. It's ground fish bladder mixed with fennel and honey, meant to swiftly coax waste from the bowels come dawn to make room for new valor. Medieval cleanse, in other words. Few knights refuse. Better to endure morning purge than tonight's indigestion nightmare. You accept. Smear a fingertip on tongue. Salt, sweet, deeply fishy. Grimace, chase with wine. Conversation turns to wounds. Sir Barthélemy raps knuckles on his breastplate where an arrow left a dent. Proclaims, hedgehog fat must have diverted the point. Squire Roland insists it was the birch and iron bark he chewed. They debate good-naturedly while gnawing opposite ends of the same eel skewer. Across the table, Lady Isabel sketches plans for tomorrow's journey on a slate coated with grease. Need more dried bilberries, need bigger barrel for mustard. Rye wafers, need to confiscate monks' barley if they complain. Logistics never sleep. By now, steam from cauldrons fogs stained glass windows. Outside panes, the night is glossy black, studded with stars. Inside, the air drips with humidity, so thick candles gutter for oxygen. Sweat beads on necks, mixing with roasted meat perfume until every nose hair is lacquered. It's in that swampy haze the Duke unveils the evening's test of fortitude, the sinister pudding. Picture an earthenware basin as wide as a shield, filled with oatmeal enriched with ox blood, diced liver, mace, and just enough honey to trick the gullible. On top, a crust of toasted barley kernels glitters like gravel.
Tradition demands each night carve a trench down the center, scoop, and eat in silence while recalling the names of the fallen. Memory exercise meets iron supplementation. You take your spoonful. Metallic tang blooms. Honey follows like a mercy clause. Silence falls so deep you can hear fire pop echoes. One by one, names whisper across benches like ghosts braided into steam. Edric of the splintered shield, Lady Rowan the quiet, the page who slipped on wet stones 6 dawns ago. No one pretends pudding redeemed them, but its weight inside stomach feels like promise to carry them forward. Silence doesn't last. A fool in motley leaps onto a barrel and announces the Spine Spice Challenge. From a pouch, he pours peppercorns, cinnamon sticks, dried chili flakes, a newfangled import, and scorpion root chips into a mortar. Grinds until smoke of spice wafts. Adds a ladle of Hedgehog drippings. What emerges is a paste so aromatic, tears leap from unprepared eyes in a 5-foot radius. Contest. Who can swallow a fingertip's worth without sputtering? Stakes, bragging rights, and the last slice of marrow-bone bread. Sir Alaric tries first. Survives, but hiccups like a startled goat. You steel nerves. Dip, taste. Heat explodes, eyes water, but you keep composure. Crowd cheers, bread earned. Worth it? Absolutely, until tomorrow's latrine visit. Speaking of latrines, Matilda's apprentices lug in fresh buckets of mint lime water to counteract spice fire. They pour into communal goblets carved from horn. Each sip like a snowball thrown at burning lips. Relief spreads, laughter follows. Overhead, the minstrel shifts melody to gentle lull. Energy softens, benches slacken. Knights lean back, sated and half asleep. And yet, feast culture dictates a final jolt. The digestive march. Torches lifted, everyone rises, forms ragged procession through corridor to courtyard. Outside, air crisp against sweat-slick skin. Under moon, stable boys have laid a serpentine trail of glowing coals about 20 paces long and 1 pace wide, banked low, not raging. Ritual, walk barefoot over embers to temper humors, mingle fire within and without. Plus, it's great for waking drowsy dinners before bed. Boots off, socks shoved in belts, you feel gravel bite, then warm powder of ash. First step onto coals, surprising softness, warmth gentle. By third step, heat intensifies, you quicken pace. Another step, then grass cools souls. Behind you, knights yelp, laugh, swear. Alchemical thinking. Hedgehog heat inside meets ember heat outside. Balance achieved. Back inside Great Hall, tables cleared. Bedrolls unfurl in alcoves. Others climb spiral stairs to dormitories where straw mattresses await. But feast still has one coda, the nightjar brew. A cauldron in the corner, almost ignored till now, holds this potion. Milk warmed with nutmeg, honey, crushed poppy seed, touch of brandy. Ladled into small cups, it's both lullaby and analgesic. You cradle yours, sip. Warmth seeps outward from throat. Muscles unclench. Battle echoes fade. The Duke himself drinks. Eyelids droop. He mutters something about tomorrow's diplomatic envoy. Stuart makes mental note. Soon, fires banked, candles snuffed, only embers neon beneath black. Snoring crescendos join distant owls. You wrap cloak, feel stomach heavy but strangely calm, fish bladder laxative waiting like a time bomb. Thoughts drift, taste of blood pudding, flash of splintered shield, scent of rosemary oil, crunch of watchberries. Before sleep claims, you whisper gratitude to hedgehog spirits. Ridiculous, but the line between faith and jest blurred hours ago. Dream welters in. A kitchen is battlefield, ladles for lances, hedgehogs rolling like spiny cannonballs. You ride a roasted boar into halls of dripping honey, fight onion demons with ginger swords. Somewhere a minstrel narrates in rhyming couplets that make zero grammatical sense. But there's comfort. Your belly arsenal stands guard. Morning strikes with ruthless trumpet. Sun spears through arrow slits, peg eyelids open. First conscious thought, the fish bladder cleanse has clocked in. You sprint for garderobe along with half the cohort. Laughter, curses, echo up stairwells. Shared misery forging fresh camaraderie. By the time you emerge lighter, the breakfast spread waits. Bowls of cold barley porridge flecked with dried apricots and, yes, grated hedgehog crackling saved from last night. Because why waste an emblem? Crunch greets teeth. Salt wakes taste buds. Apricot sweet morning herald. Jugs of nettle beer passed, low alcohol, high vitamins. You drink expecting bitterness, surprised by crisp herbal fizz that slaps cheeks awake. Outside, a courier gallops in. News of a rival baron assembling forces 3 days south. Another campaign looms, meaning more marches, more menu improvisation. Strategists convene, quills scratching parchment. Mathilde eavesdrops, already composing supply list. Dried gooseberry bricks, sprouted grain cakes, powdered beef heart for emergency gruel. She dispatches 2 apprentices to local mill, pays extra to grind barley fine for portable wafers. Logistics wheel begins spinning before armor buckles. You volunteer for foraging squad. Task, scour nearby woods for green gold. Alexander's, sorrel, young tamarisk, anything fresh to fortify menus. 5 of you ride out at midday, stomachs pleasantly anchored by porridge. The forest greets with loamy breath. Sun spangles leaves. Birds trill warnings you can't decipher. You dismount, spread canvas sacks, and begin harvest. Sorrel's lemon tang perfumes air. Alexander's exudes celery scent. At Streambank, you relocate wild watercress. Cool, crisp, peppery. Pack everything. Tie sacks to saddles. On return path, you stop at an abandoned apiary. Bees gone, hives cracked, but comb remnants yield dark honey. You scoop into leather pouch, already imagining honey-soaked sorrel rolls. Back to castle by dusk, ye hand over bounty. Mathilde beams, instructs oven slaves to fold sorrel into bread dough, swirl honey on top. Herbal carbohydrate grenades for March. She thanks you with a taste test, a thick slice hot from hearth, vapors curling. Bite releases steam-laced lemon, sweet bee's blood, echo of wood smoke. Could convert pacifists into plunderers. Preparations escalate. Armory throbs with hammer blows. Fletchers tie goose feathers to shafts. Stable hands brush horses while feeding the mash of oats and grated carrot. Orange thunder. In the kitchens, new experiments simmer.
Lacemaker's broth, bone stock plus shredded cabbage and beer, furze cakes, gorse petals, oats, pork lard, and the daring ash cheese, goat cheese rolled in charcoal for microbial mystery. Outlandish? Sure, but if knights believe it fuels victory, it might. Medieval warfare, 50% tactics, 50% story you tell your gut. Evening brings a quieter supper, scarcity rehearsal. Lentil pottage thick as mortar, flavored by a single hedgehog tail for nostalgia. Bread dark, dense, travels well. As spoons scrape bowls, Sir Barthélemy proposes a prayer to St. Lawrence, patron of cooks and grill victims, quite fitting. They recite, then dunk bread crusts with newfound reverence. Later you roam battlements, night crisp, moon fat. Below you spot Matilda and apprentices in herb garden, clipping feverfew, meadowsweet, and rue. Not culinary, medicinal. Battle means wounds, wounds mean infection, herbs mean hope. Food and medicine threads weave. You realize tomorrow's march will carry not just weapons and banners, but entire apothecaries disguised as spice chests. Insomnia flickers. You descend to chapel, kneel before flickering candle, whisper thanks for hedgehog guardians again, absurd yet comfort. Chaplain enters, nods, places small wafer on your palm, dried fig stamped with cross. Strength in sweetness, he murmurs. You eat. Sugary seeds crunch, fig flesh melts, and peace settles. First light drags color across sky. Breakfast minimal, furze cakes and mint water. Horses saddled, packs bulge with sorrel bread, ash cheese, honey walnuts, watchberries 2.0 dusted in lavender sugar, and of course a crate of raw hedgehogs on ice. Someone found a snow patch up mountain. Standard lines up, armor gleams after oil rub. Trumpets clear throats, portcullis lifts. You exhale, tasting mint, charcoal, hope. As column creaks forward, Mathilde hands you a leather scroll listing ration plan for next 7 days. At bottom, a note. Save the hedgehog hearts for moments of doubt. They beat courage into yours. You tuck scroll inside tunic, pulse quickening under parchment. Road unwinds ahead, flanked by fields of ripening wheat, symbol of battles yet to be bred. Feet of hundreds crunch gravel in sync, like a chewing mouth devouring distance. Behind, Castle Tower recedes, but its culinary folklore travels with every oatcake, honey jar, and nettle beer skin. Tomorrow you'll camp under star-punched sky, roast stew in iron pots, tell stories of hedgehog heroics until planets fall drowsy. And the day after, maybe clash steel again, fueled by sorrow lime wafers that some future minstrels will exaggerate into dragon biscuits. History is flavor memory, sharp, smoky, sometimes spiky. If you're still awake, toast yourself. Few endure a feast, a purge, and a midnight ember walk without nodding off. Smash that like button the way Sir Fulk smashed pine nuts. Subscribe for more medieval menu mayhem, and drop a comment. Which new forest herb should join the next campaign ration? Alexander's, watercress, or gorse petals? Your vote might shape tomorrow's warrior picnic basket of power. Mist hangs low over the marching column like a second, paler banner, one stitched from damp wool and bad omens. The hedgerows on either side of the sun-starved road drip with yesterday's rain, and every cartwheel squelches as though the earth itself would prefer you stay put and plant turnips instead of ferrying steel and sorrel bread toward trouble. But trouble has already booked the venue 3 valleys south, and it expects a punctual audience. Hooves clack, leather creaks. Someone up front tries to whistle St. Dymphna's jig, but keeps losing the tune to shivers. You tug your cloak tighter, taste last night's mint-infused nettle beer still lingering like a friendly ghost at the back of your tongue, and tell yourself that the hedgehog hearts in Matilda's crate are beating bravery for all of you. Marching rations debut at mid-morning halt. Fist-sized lumps of sorrel honey bread wrapped in cabbage leaves to keep them moist, half a rind of ash cheese each, and a single dragon biscuit. Gorse petals, oat, lard, and just enough ginger to sting lips awake again. You sit on a fallen oak, unwrap your cabbage parcel, and steam wafts upward like a humble miracle. The bread still smells of hearth smoke and lemony greens. Biting in, you crunch honey caramelized crust, feel it flake down tunic, don't care. Alaric drops beside you, armor clanging like poorly tuned bells. Mutters that his biscuit tastes like sunburnt hay with a hint of apocalypse, then devours it anyway. Fuel is fuel. Scouts return with news of a bridge washed out, forcing detour through swampy commons locals call the Hag's Apron. Spirits dip. Boglands mean sucking mud, mosquitoes, and an odor reminiscent of boiled cabbage left in the sun. The Duke orders pace doubled to clear the morass before dusk. Cooks grimace. Double pace means double hunger. But Mathilde simply pats her spice satchel as though it's a quiver of secret arrows and strides on. You follow, boots squelching. By noon, the path sinks into reed-choked slurry. Horses labor, carts tilt. Someone loses a boot to mud that burps its victory. The surgeon prescribes willow bark chew for aching joints. The fool prescribes laughter and obliges by tripping, on purpose, face first into a puddle, emerging crowned with algae. Even the Duke cracks a reluctant grin. Morale salvaged. Mid-swamp, Mathilde calls an emergency snack council beside a crooked willow. She hands out cups of sedge sip, warm broth brewed from eel bones, marsh thyme, and a splash of brandy, ladled from a cauldron that has somehow bounced in a cart without spilling. One gulp and swamp chill retreats apace. She follows with tiny waxed packets of pickled flag root. Bite into one and tongue lights up like a struck match, peppery, medicinal, alarming, but lungs open wider, nostrils flare clear. Knights cough, then cheer, the way men do when they mistake pain for entertainment. As afternoon shadows lengthen, the bog tightens its grip. A cart axle snaps, crates of provisions topple, including the crate of raw hedgehogs. Panic spikes until a squire confirms the hedgehog survived, albeit indignant and mud-speckled. They're repacked. Someone marks the crate with a charcoal doodle of a crown, Mud Kings, for luck. Nightfall finds Column exhausted on the far side of the Hag's Apron, legs soaked, tempers frayed. Camp rises in a clearing ringed by wind-gnarled hawthorns. Fires hiss on damp wood, spit racks assembled. Dinner tonight must redeem misery.
Mathilde, eyes gleaming with witch chef fervor, unveils her comeback menu. Bog-blessed hedgehog pie. Step 1. Gut and parboil the mud kings in nettle water spiked with juniper berries. Step 2. Shred meat, mix with minced leek, diced pickled flag root for heat, handful of those pine nuts folk loves, and a spill of ale to moisten. Step 3. Encase in pastry tinted green with pureed sorrel. Step 4. Bake in portable iron Dutch ovens buried in coals. While pie is transformed, cauldrons bubble with March milk. Oat broth simmered with fennel seed, carrot slivers, and a finger of smoked bacon just for soul. Steam coats noses, conversation revives. Someone starts a betting pool on whose pie will leak first. Odds favor the Dukes because cooks overloaded it with victory filling. Laughter wafts with smoke. Mosquitoes retreat, perhaps offended by the abundance of seasoning. The fool improvises a fire circle performance, balancing a hedgehog pie on his head while reciting heroic couplets that devolve into puns about quills and spills. Minstrels underscore with lutes tuned intentionally sour for comedic twang. Even the surgeon applauds. Rare. When pies emerge, pastries glow swamp green and smell of woodland roasts. You bite, crust flakes, interior gushes, savory, herbaceous, pepper bright from flag root. Misery melts faster than cheese on coals. Across the fire, Alaric devours half a pie in one breath, exclaims he could lift a war horse now. 3 squires glance at each other, dare him. Predictable ruckus ensues. Warhorse unimpressed. Alaric's back unimpressed. Surgeon hands him willowbark chew. Again. Post-dinner lull invites storytelling. Knights trade superfood legends. Sir Barthélemy claims Norman warriors ate fermented shark to channel ocean rage. Lady Isabel counters with tale of Lithuanian horse archers sipping mare's milk mixed with blood for endurance. All agree nothing tops Hedgehog for sheer underdog charm. Fool suggests next campaign menu feature roasted mole for subterranean stealth. Noted, laughs. Before sleep, Mathilde distributes cinder candies. Charcoal tablets rolled in honey and anise, meant to settle stomachs and ward swamp miasma. You suck one. Honey soothes. Charcoal grit reminds teeth of campfire. Anise leaves aftertaste of licorice lullaby. Bedroll beckons. Dawn's trumpet blares too soon. The dreaded bog purge begins. Fish bladder laxative schedule unstoppable. Latrine lines snake through hawthorn thorns. Curses thread air. But by sunrise proper, bodies reset and morale ready. Breakfast, thin slices of bog-blessed pie, reheated on shields over embers, plus nettle tea with mint. Even reheated, pie still roars. Scouts return. Enemy host spotted near Milltown of Alderwick, 2 days' march. Strategy Council decides to skirt ridge, strike flank. That means crossing the bleak downs, open heather plain with little cover, notorious for biting winds. Cooks pivot menus accordingly, high fat, high salt, pocket friendly. Mathilde decrees production of wind bricks, lard, oats, hazelnut, cranberries compressed into fist-weight bars baked hard.
They keep forever, weigh like gilt, taste like sweetened gravel, but sustain. Mid-March, you witness Kitchen Squad performing culinary triage, converting leftover loom-hard bread into panade soup by boiling with garlic and ale, then dehydrating into leather-like sheets that can be re-wetted later. Efficiency is scripture. On the Downs' first night, wind knifes through tents, steals heat from marrow. Fires gutter, sparks race sideways. Mathilde commands building of stone stoves, shallow pits lined with hot rocks, kettles nestled inside, lids of turf locking in heat. Result: stew simmers unseen, wind thwarted. Tonight's special, hare and hedgehog duet, with windbrick crumbs as thickener, root vegetables filched from abandoned fields, plus a slug of brandy for baritone. You crouch over pit, inhale steam scented of thyme and courage. Spoons clink, spirits lift. After supper, the Duke calls quiet hour. Knights sit in cloaks, backs to wind, staring at stars, naming constellations. The sword, the hearth, the quill. Someone asserts Hedgehog constellation hides behind the sword, only visible when brave hearts look. Everyone strains eyes, swears they see spiny outline. It becomes a pact. Pre-sleep ritual includes chewing dried rose hips for vitamin vigor. Surgeon insists. They taste like Tark promise. Wind finally calms. Tents no longer snap like angry sails. Sleep deeper than moat. Mornin' greetin', frost on saddles, breath clouds. Breakfast minimal, wind bricks dunked in hot ale to soften to fudgy mass. Not delicious, but warms. Final approach to Alderwick unfolds under battle tension. Enemy scouts skirmish, arrows trade greetings, knights ready. Mathilde's last culinary pep talk. Disperse hedgehog hearts, one per night. She presents them skewered, lightly smoked, dusted with salt and juniper. They resemble marinated chestnuts. Each knight kneels, receives heart, eats solemnly. Taste earthy, rich, faintly gamey. Symbol weight heavier than flavor. You feel pulse echo. Battle narrative accelerates, infantry clashes, cavalry flanks, archers reign. Amid chaos, you notice knights more ferocious than usual. Placebo or protein? Who cares? Hedgehog hearts beat in unison with war drums. The Duke's banner spears through dust, enemy line shudders. Your memory fragments. Clang, sweat, roar, smell of iron and hedgehog still on breath. Flash of sorrel bread crust jammed in mouth between charges. Swig of nettle beer warm but reliving. At one moment you drop shield, Squire tosses another, you catch, handle sticky with honey residue from someone's emergency snack. Grip better for it. By dusk, Alderwick's millyard hours. Casualty carts roll. Surgeon triages with willowbark tincture and mallow poultices. Kitchen corps springs into dual roles, cooking and healing. They boil bone stock for wounded, crush feverfew into paste, brew ale porridge for shock victims. You help slice nettle leaves, sprinkle over cauldrons. Watch green ribbons swirl into cloudy broth like serpents taming chaos. Feast of relief still happens, though subdued.
Menu: victory gruel, barley, bone stock, carrots, leftover hedgehog bits, fortified with egg yolks whisked in to thicken. Simple, nourishing, merciful. Bowls passed quietly, each spoonful a balm. Fools' jokes quieter too, but silver slivers of laughter still slip through. Later, knights gather around mill pond mirror still, moon reflecting. They drop crumbs of wind brick into water as thanks to unknown spirits. Ripples expand, swallow crumbs. You feel weight of day ease. Before turning in, remember YouTube duties. You fish out notebook, jot script ideas by campfire glow. Viewers will need to taste the fatigue, the strange gratitude of hedgehog hearts, the quiet relief of barley gruel. You'll ask them to like, subscribe, comment their own bizarre energy snacks, roasted crickets, candied garlic, so algorithm gods may gift the channel wings. Sleep claims you on straw bed in mill loft, gears creaking lullaby. Dreams revisit feast circle, but hedgehogs now march wearing night helmets, chanting strength in spines. Absurd? Exactly. A thin hush blankets the captured mill town at dawn. The kind of hush that smells of damp straw, spent arrows, and the worn-out sighs of men who fought until their swords grew dull. Smoke rises in languid ribbons from cook fires scattered among roofless cottages. Somewhere, a one-winged chicken proclaims itself king of the ruins, flapping in slow, lopsided circles on a manure heap. You stand beside a half-collapsed granary, rubbing the kink from your shoulder where chainmail slept crooked, and try to remember the last time you stretched without wincing. The battle for Alderwick belongs to yesterday. Today belongs to logistics, bandages, and, if Mathilde has her stubborn way, one final culinary miracle brewed from scraps, ashes, and whatever courage the company hasn't already spent. First order of business: inventory the bruised pantry. Quartermasters roll open barrels, one still half full of honey, two with cracked lids leaking oats like tears. A crate of hedgehog meat reeking faintly of battlefield dust, yet somehow still fresh under its sorrel leaf packing. There's also a surprise stash: 3 crocks of dried seaweed looted from coastal traders weeks ago and forgotten. Mathilde's eyes glint like tarnished coins. Seaweed, she murmurs, tasting the syllables, is ocean marrow. We'll chew the sea to mend the bone. No one knows exactly what that means, but no one doubts she'll prove it by supper time. Second order: salvage water. The mill stream is brown with churned mud and whispers of blood. So you organize bucket brigades to lug cleaner flow from an upstream spring. The buckets are dented helmets, the path lined with crushed thistles. Every third step a foot slips, someone curses, someone else laughs because falling is easier than marching and hurts a lot less. Inside the spring's cold, iron-tanged water, you find leeches fat as thumbs. The surgeon says keep them, they'll be useful. He's kidding, mostly. Back in the village square, blacksmiths convert broken spear shafts into spits and pothooks. They hammer iron against anvil mounted on a tree stump whose rings count more winters than any man present. Sparks skip across cobbles.
One lands on your boot, burns a perfect star before you can stomp it out. It feels like the world leaving its autograph on your leather. Mathilde commandeers the ruined churchyard for her kitchen. The church still has half a roof and a holy well in the nave. Water surprisingly clear. She posts 2 squires as angels of the ladle, instructs them to guard the well from reckless washing of feet or swords. Meanwhile, the fool repurposes an overturned reliquary box as a ginger grater, insisting any saintly dust left inside can only bless the flavor. Mathilde doesn't argue. Mid-morning, ration bells clang. Time for hero's porridge. It's barley simmered with bone stock, sweetened by melting a shard of honeycomb directly into the pot, then brightened with fistfuls of chopped nettle. Everyone receives a wooden bowl and a strip of seaweed jerky to chew between spoonfuls. You hesitate, salty and kelp-fishy, but once you start chewing, it tastes like fortitude dipped in brine, oddly refreshing. The surgeon strolls the line, handing out willow bark tincture chasers poured into repurposed arrowheads. Knights toast like nobles with miniature silver goblets. After breakfast, repair crews tackle the mill's water wheel. Lumber from shattered carts becomes replacement spokes. Carpenters sing work songs about ale barrels with no bottoms, hitting each downbeat with a mallet strike. Their chorus drifts across the pond, where ducks paddle through debris, utterly unimpressed. The Duke convenes council beneath a tattered awning, parchment maps weighted with river stones. His plan: hold Alderwick 3 days to let wounded heal, then press north toward the crossing at Candleford. But supply wagons lag 2 valleys behind. If they don't arrive before departure, everyone's eating boiled shoe tongues. Quartermaster's pale. Mathilde raises a spoon like a mace. "Give me grain, honey, and Hedgehog," she declares, "and I'll march you to the moon." The Duke, successfully reassured or simply amused, nods approval. With strategy settled, afternoon shifts to scavenging. You lead a foraging party beyond town wall, really just an overgrown thorn hedge, and into alder groves humming with bees. There you find rabbit warrens, wild garlic, and, miracle, clusters of puffball mushrooms the size of helmets. You tap one, and spores burst like gray smoke, prompting laughter that startles a nearby doe into flight. Squires net 2 rabbits. Another returns with arms full of green walnuts. A third drags an entire fallen beehive, bees still disgruntled. Mathilde will placate them with smoke and steal their comb, culinary diplomacy at its finest. Back in camp, butchers' apprentices joint the rabbits and hedgehogs under an apple tree buzzing with wasps. They work fast but tender, saving hearts and livers for special tonic. Offal goes into a copper cauldron with chopped garlic, minced seaweed, walnuts crushed to paste, and blackthorn berries gleaned from hedgerow. Mathilde pours in a generous tide of ale, last barrels from village tavern, tasting of smoke and plums, and sets the cauldron to whisper over coals. Blood-thick brew, she names it, promising it will glue spirit to flesh. Around mid-afternoon, clouds roll heavy and sullen. It rains, not battlefield drizzle, but a hard, drumming cloudburst that scrubs roofs, fills gutters, and turns lanes back to mud porridge. Yet inside the half-roofed church kitchen, fires roar bright. You duck inside, dripping, to find Mathilde orchestrating a culinary opera. Squire choir whisking, kneading, chopping in counterpoint. On the nave altar turned butcher block rests the enormous puffball, now sliced into thick discs painted with herbs. She plans to roast them as cloud steaks, claiming mushrooms recall the softness of angels' pillows, which warriors need after nightmares. The fool, sporting a wreath of garlic stems, leaps onto a broken pew and declares today Saint Hedgehog's feast day, patron of improbable victories and prickly humor. He leads everyone in raucous hymn, composed on the spot, each verse ending with "prick us, poke us, but never broke us," until Mathilde shoos him out lest he scorch the mezzo forte. Outside, rain eases. Sunset bleeds gold through ragged clouds, and camp stirs for supper. Fires dot the square like constellations fallen to earth. From cauldrons rises perfume of stew, so rich you swear it coats lungs. Mathilde ladles generous portions into trenchers carved from day-old bread. Each bowl is crowned with a cloud steak glistening with rabbit fat glaze. When you bite, puffball flesh collapses into savory foam, releasing notes of thyme, smoke, and grounded lightning, if lightning had a taste. Rabbit hedgehog stew underneath is velvet thunder, sharp with garlic, sweet with honey, and briny with seaweed. Knights eat silently at first, eyes wide, then begin thumping tables, spears, each other's shoulders, language of approval older than words. Post-meal, Mathilde unveils dessert. Candied green walnuts drizzled with bees' honey, speckled with crushed, toasted pine nuts saved from earlier pies. They taste of resinous caramel, bittersweet like victory hymns sung for fallen friends. Many wipe tears they blame on wood smoke. Night deepens, but duties remain. A small squad escorts villagers to collect watercress from marsh pools, vitamin needed to chase scurvy. Another reinforces palisade with mill planks. You volunteer for night watch along Eastern Lane. Air sits calm, smelling of wet earth and cooling hearthstones. Ahead, moon peaks like a polished shield through tatters of cloud. From distance drifts faint melody, minstrels testing new ballad about hedgehog hearts. Lyrics clumsy but earnest. At watch's midway, Mathilde appears with thermos, actually a repurposed iron flagon of blood-thick brew left to mellow. She hands tin cup, fills it. Liquid pours slow, dark as midnight, punctuated by soft walnut grit. You sip. Warmth spreads through ribs, slow but certain, like sunrise crawling up spine. Flavor, sweet, saline, mineral, reminds you of tears shed in secret and laughter echoed in cavernous halls. You thank her. She shrugs, says recipes are just spells disguised as groceries. Near midnight, an alarm, shadowy figures at far barn. Knights converge, swords half drawn, only to find starving deserters rummaging grain sacks. Instead of steel, the Duke offers them stew and chance to sign on as laborers. They accept, confused. Mathilde feeds them bowls so full they men atonement. Sometimes diplomacy is a ladle. Before dawn glows, kitchen stirs again. Breakfast must gird for march, supplies still MIA. So Mathilde devises alderwick wheels, portable pastries shaped like mill gears, rye dough stuffed with minced hedgehog, diced apple, seaweed flake, and smear of fermented honey. Baked at pre-dawn, they emerge bronzed and aromatic. She issues 2 wheels per night, warns to ration, winks knowing they will not. You pack camp, sling shield, tuck wheels into satchel. The fool paces line, ringing little handbell, shouting subscription pitches. Ring this bell in your heart, friends, and like our deeds, share them wide. Knights groan. Still, a few clap. Engagement metrics satisfied. The march north begins on road newly rinsed by rain, sky clear as blown glass. Early miles passed in quiet recollection. You chew first wheel, filling bursts with sweet savory tide, pastry flakes dancing in wind. Energy surges, shame fades, road shortens. Mid-morning, supply wagons finally rumble into view, driven hard overnight. Cheers erupt. Barrels slosh ale, sacks bulge grain, and, wonder of wonders, there's a cask of imported spices, cinnamon, cloves, saffron. Mathilde examines like a jeweler, then commands quick lunch halt to turn hope into flavor. She whips up spiced oat gruel laced with cinnamon and hedgehog drippings, served in hollowed turnips as bowls. Even the Duke lines for seconds. Afternoon brings Candleford's rolling meadows, dotted with sheep who stare as if knights are walking scarecrows. Scouts report bridge intact but watched. The Duke opts for night crossing. Until then, conceal camp in nearby birch copse. Fires low, voices lower. Mathilde prepares pre-battle culminative tea. Valerian root, chamomile, and micro-pinch of saffron for color. She instructs each night to pair cup with deep breaths. You sip, sleepiness creeps friendly. Twilight hush broken by minstrel duet of lute and recorder playing Prick Us, Poke Us, the Hedgehog hymn, slowed to lullaby tempo. Tents glow like fireflies under birch canopy. You roll into blanket, wheels under head as pillow, dream of saffron-colored rivers and hedgehogs surfing upon pies. Hours later, horns rustle you awake. Bridge time. Moon waxes bright, painting armor silver. Tea's calm still in veins, but adrenaline sharpening edges. Kitchen crew passes final treats. Stealth mints. Parsley leaves dipped in honey mixed with crushed pepper. They freshen breath, clear sinuses, jolt senses. You chew, eyes water pleasantly. Crossing succeeds with minimal clash. A few arrows traded, 1 footman wounded. Surgeons patch, Mathilde supplies honey to seal bandage. Once across, relief exhaled, but march continues toward ridge that hides next valley. Moon sets, dawn hints. Breakfast on March 2nd, wheel devoured cold, just as tasty. Conversation turns to future feasts. Mathilde muses about incorporating lamb sorrel and ground acorns for bread. Wonders if roasted crow could replace rabbit when game's scarce. Fool proposes dessert called Knight's Regret, made from burnt crusts soaked in brandy until they forget being burnt. Everyone laughs quietly. When sun finally crowns ridge, the world ahead shines green, promising, indifferent. Nights pause, shoulders heavy,
yet hearts lit by stew memory. The Duke raises sword. Light catches hedgehog crest, newly painted on crossguard overnight by unknown prankster. He doesn't scrub it off. He salutes the day.
And that, midnight listeners, is where our boots now stand, on a ridge between victories. Stomachs fortified by cloud stakes, blood smooth with brew, pockets cradling the last alderwick wheels. If these flavors have marched into your imagination, smash that like button till it squeals. Share in the comments which unlikely wartime snack you'd stash for strength, and swing that subscribe bell like a skillet over campfire. It keeps this journey simmering. Dawn doesn't so much break as bloom, unrolling across the sky like saffron in hot milk. The ridge you conquered in the night is now a balcony over a brand new stage. Low hills tufted with gorse, a river wriggling silver through marsh reeds, and, perched on a rocky knuckle at the valley's heart, the citadel of Candleford. Its curtain wall is pale granite, rose-tinted by sunrise, and its towers lift banners that hang limp in the still air, as though the garrison hasn't yet decided which way courage will blow today. Somewhere inside those walls pulse grain stores, salt cellars, and, if rumor is kind, a treasury fat enough to pay every night twice over. But that's not why your stomach tightens. You're thinking of the townsfolk penned behind those stones, waiting for a fate written by strangers with bigger swords. You're thinking of how a cook's ladle might weigh more than a spear if the right hunger goes unanswered. Camp rouses quietly. There is no trumpet or drum. The only music is the whisper of mail rings and the creak of leather straps settling into shoulders still tender from yesterday's haul. Mathilde moves among bedrolls like a sunrise in human form, a kevel swinging from each hand, steam ghosting behind her. She ladles valerian saffron tea into horn cups and adds a pebble of crystallized honey to each, tiny suns melting in golden swirls. You sip, warmth, sweetness, a breath of meadow. Muscles unclench, nightmares evaporate like dew. While scouts slip down slope to probe the approaches, the kitchen core assembles beneath a birch whose bark peels in papery curls. Today's rations will be the last drawn from Alderwick spoils. After that, everything hinges on whatever waits inside Candleford. Inventories reveal 2 sacks of rye, half a jar of preserved hedgehog fat, shimmering like bronze under thin skin of lard, 3 brittle sticks of cinnamon, and a modest fist of saffron threads spared from the tea. Mathilde turns these meager relics in her palms like bones for divination. Finally, she announces a plan to conjure victory scrip, a travel bread said to last 10 days, rumored in Breton songs, though no one's actually tasted it. Legend claims it's made with dough bound by honeyed fat, spiced to survive rot, and sealed with toasted saffron, so it remembers the sun even beneath the earth. You volunteer for the kneading crew. Knees planted in damp grass, you plunge fists into a trough of rye flour, while a squire drizzles melted hedgehog fat, liquid amber smelling faintly of woodland moss. Another trickles honey. The dough clings, stubborn as siege mud, but soon silky elasticity forms. Mathilde calls for a dash of river salt, and the cinnamon shaved fine with a dagger's edge. Finally, she sprinkles the precious saffron threads, crushed between finger and thumb, and the dough blushes sunset orange. You shape it into fist-sized rounds, scoring each with a mill wheel pattern to honor Alderwick. The rounds are arrayed on a flat shield borrowed from a sleeping archer, slid into the embers of a trench oven hastily dug in the birch grove. Ash covers them like snowfall. Time will turn ash to crust. As the bread bakes, scouts return with gifts of information. The western approach to Candleford is swampy and slow. The eastern gate sits atop a causeway crowned by a drawbridge, currently down for morning market traffic. Wagons in, refuse out. More crucial, the town's grain stores are rumored dangerously low after a bad harvest, which means Candleford can't endure a long siege. The Duke's Council sees an opportunity. Present overwhelming force at the gate, bluff rather than batter, negotiate surrender before noon stew. Bluff requires theater. Theater requires costuming. Enter the fool, of course, who paints wild hedgehog insignias on every shield face he can reach, using soot and fat for ink. A new order of chivalry, he proclaims, the Knights Prickly. Groans follow, but spirits lift all the same. Even the Duke submits his helm for a tiny hedgehog sketched above the visor slit. War may be serious, but seriousness alone never won a hungry belly. Mid-morning, the victory scrip emerges from ashes glowing a perfect russet. Crusts crack like kiln-fired pottery, releasing steam scented of cinnamon forest. Each knight receives one round, still warm, as the army assembles on the ridge crest. You bite, chewy, slightly sweet, smoky from ash, with a saffron whisper that makes you think of summer hayfields. It sticks to your ribs like a promise of tomorrow. Columns descend the ridge in disciplined silence, banners folded to keep intentions ambiguous. Near the valley floor, a drummer taps a heartbeat cadence on a single skin. Villagers working outer fields look up, drop tools, and scatter toward the gate, yelling warnings. The drawbridge creaks, chain rattles, but before it can lift fully, a supply wagon stuck halfway across becomes wedged, blocking closure. A comic mishap, or perhaps providence fueled by hedgehog luck. The Duke signals halt at pike's length from the moat. Helmet off, he advances alone with a single guard bearing white cloth. Negotiations begin. You can't hear words, but gestures drift back. Candleford captain waving arms, Duke folding patiently. Minutes stretch like boiled taffy. Finally, a page sprints from Duke to line. Candleford will surrender, provided citizens keep homes and harvest. Garrison marches out with sidearms only. The army exhales collective relief. No fight, no blood. All you've got to do now is feed a starving town. Matilda's eyes spark the way they did when she first saw seaweed. "Open their kitchens," she orders. "We'll anchor peace with stew." She leads a contingent across the half-lowered bridge, you close behind, nose already cataloging the sense of an unfamiliar pantry. Candleford's market square is ghost quiet, shops shuttered, but smoke trickles from chimneys. Women peek through slatted windows, children clutch doorframes. You notice their gaunt cheeks, the way they watch bread round in your hand like cats watching mice. You break off pieces, offer them. At first suspicion holds, then hunger wins. Tiny hands accept, mouths chew, eyes widen at cinnamony sweetness. Hedgehog nights become saints in an instant. The Duke convenes elders in the Guildhall, but Mathilde ranges street to street, assessing larders. In a stone warehouse, she discovers barrels of salted herring, untouched because townsfolk grew sick of brine. In a cellar, baskets of shriveled apples on the edge of rot. She grins, the way mathematicians grin at solvable equations. Fish and fruit, you ask, dubious? Trust the tongue of necessity, she replies. By noon, 5 great cauldrons borrowed from Candleford's bathhouse bubble in the square. Base, diced herring simmered to slack its salt. Next, apple chunks, honey drizzle, splash of last night ale. She thickens broth with rye crumbled from her own victory scrip, then perfumes it with crushed nettle, cinnamon stick, and, most daring, 2 whole puffballs discovered in a monk's garden along cloister wall. The brew turns pale gold, flecked with green. Sweet brine balanced by woodland umami. Local children circle cauldrons like moths. Mathilde lets them sniff ladle steam. They giggle at fishy apple surprise. When the Duke emerges to declare terms met, bowls are already ladled. He tastes first, eyebrows climbing. Candleford Captain tastes next, jaw slackening. Soon soldiers and townsfolk queue side by side, distinctions melting into stew. You catch a scene that will lodge forever. A burly knight squatting to share spoonfuls with an elderly cobbler who tears pieces off his one victory scrip to float like dumplings. Food writes treaties faster than quills. Afternoon drifts into a makeshift festival. Minstrels strum hedgehog hymns atop a wagon. Bakers revive long cold ovens to rebake stale loaves, now dipped in stew. Children invent a game of rolling mill-wheel patterned bread like hoops down alleys, chasing with shrieks that ricochet off walls. You help erect communal tables from wagon planks. On them, Mathilde sets platters of surrender slices, puffball steaks layered with herring apple relish. Skeptical diners take tentative bites, then grin greasy. Someone proclaims Hedgehog their new heraldic beast. Laughter erupts. But not all is merriment. Infirmaries brim with wounded from earlier skirmishes. Mathilde recruits you and the fool to deliver nutrient broth, hedgehog fat rendered with garlic, seaweed infusion, and a pinch of crushed walnut. Patient sip, color returns. One archer, feverish, clutches your wrist. Promise me the hedgehogs marched too. You tell her yes, they led the vanguard, wearing acorn helmets. She smiles weakly, drifts to sleep. Evening summons council again. The army could press onward tomorrow, but the Duke elects 2-day respite to fortify friendships and bury dead. Candleford's masons promise millstones for your siege train. Its seamstresses stitch hedgehog badges onto cloaks. In return, Mathilde pledges to teach townsfolk victory scrip recipe, minus one secret twist, because every legend needs mystery. Night deepens. Torches halo square. Music softens to lullaby. Mathilde bends over final cauldron, stirring embers. She calls you close, presses into your palm a small sealed jar, translucent amber fat flecked with saffron. Spread on bread before battle, she whispers, and fear becomes flavor. You tuck it inside tunic, warmth beating against chest like second heart. Later, you climb Candleford's watchtower. Valley lies silvered under crescent moon. Fires flicker, camp and town indistinguishable. You crunch the last shard of victory scrip. Crumbs scatter on wind. Below, you hear the fool announcing Hedgehog merchandise to sleepy guards. Carved turnip figurines for a penny. The guards groan. Still, coins clink. Engagement metrics soar. At Tower Parapet, you realize journey that began with roasted hedgehog curiosity now ends in stew-forged peace. Odd superfoods indeed. You trace finger along scratchings in stone, old watchman tally marks. Add one more for tonight's quiet victory. Back in square, Mathilde stands alone by dying fire. You approach. She looks tired yet fierce. Food is memory, she says, and tomorrow they'll remember this taste instead of fear. You thank her, louder than intended. She merely nods, heads toward makeshift dormitory where dawn's dough awaits. You collapse on straw pallet inside Guildhall, helmet for pillow. Dream arrives swift. Hedgehogs wielding wooden spoons like lances, charging across bread fields toward a castle made of cheese. They breach gates not with siege towers, but with laughter. Inside, prisoners made of fear melt into puddles of broth. You wake smiling. Morning 2 of peace. Candleford's bell rings not for alarm, but for breakfast. Stew continues, now with carrots from town gardens, puffballs rebranded moon loaves. At table, night scribes pen official account, dubbing the battle the Hedgehog Accord. You realize historians will debate why hedgehogs of all talismans turned tide. Let them puzzle. True answer tastes of honey, smoke, and a cook's stubborn heart. As noon's sun climbs, army readies departure. Next campaign, next craving. Candleforders line road, pressing gifts, woven rush bracelets, jars of pickled crab apples, knitted hedgehog dolls. Mathilde trades recipes for seeds, promising to plant Candleford thyme in any land they liberate. The Duke rides front, helm hedgehog still proudly etched. Before marching, he orders single drum roll. On final beat, every knight raises bread wheel high, then bites in unison. The loudest communal crunch the valley has ever heard. Clouds of crumbs drift like celebratory confetti. Road bends north, taking you toward new unknowns, but aroma of saffron and smoke clings to cloaks, a portable hearth. The fool walks backward, waving goodbye, almost tumbles into ditch, rights himself amid cheers. Behind, Candleford's walls recede, no longer target, now ally. Ahead, horizon glints with possibilities as wide as hunger itself. And that, night travelers, is where our tale settles its spoon. Proof that the oddest superfoods, roasted hedgehog, seaweed jerky, puffball clouds, can fortify more than sinew. They can season destiny, soften sieges, stitch strangers into kin.
If these flavors stirred your appetite for history, hammer that like button like a blacksmith shaping truth. Subscribe so you never miss the next midnight feast, and drop a comment sharing the strangest dish you dare to taste beside our prickly order.
Until the next sleepy adventure, keep your bread wheels warm, your cauldrons brave, and remember, sometimes the sharpest weapon in a knight's arsenal is simply a spoon willing to stir hope. Good night, and dream of hedgehogs marching by moonlight.